So good afternoon and welcome to everyone who is listening in today. My name is Miriam Bellamy. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I'm the director of Whole Family Neurofeedback. And as part of our guest expert series, I have invited today Dr. Val Brown, who has practiced clinical psychology for a number of years, maybe a number of decades.
I'm on inactive status.
Yes.
I actually have been since 2000.
Okay. And before that, how many years did you practice?
Before that, 15 as a licensed psychologist.
Yeah.
Prior to that, a long time in various other, psych tech on inpatient units, all that kind of stuff for years. So
yeah, a lot of us get our starts right in the hospital setting. Yeah, I did too. Yeah. So you also have a background in mathematics, philosophy, what else? Martial arts.
Yes.
Yes.
Yoga, quantum mechanics, programming. I kind of cover the waterfront.
Okay.
It's interesting. I was talking a number of years ago to a colleague in the field, whole different system, whole different approach. But he's a biomedical engineer, and there was a group of us all together, and somehow conversation came up about philosophy, I think it was. And he turned to me and he looked and he said, You're not a biomedical engineer? And I went, no. God, when we talk, you sound just like one. It's like, well, I adapt. I speak a lot of languages.
Yeah.
In that sense.
Yeah. And I think most importantly, I think a lot of those things integrate for you in your background in neurofeedback. I think you were in the field in some way, shape, or form almost from its inception.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting story, and I believe we have a mention of it on the website. But actually, back in high school, I had just finished reading Freud's posthumously published A Project for Scientific Psychology, and in that he tried to understand the mind. He tried to understand it in a more biological, or at least neurological fashion, as an energy transformational system. Now, this thing was written back in 1895, so the energy transformational systems back then were steam engines. And that's why we have drives, because it's like the driver of the steam engine that makes the wheels go, right? That's a very quick piece of it. But as I read that, I thought, well, wait a minute, I know quantum mechanics. If we just understand this metaphor in terms of the energetic transformations in quantum mechanics, whoa, we could computerize that in some way ultimately and have a self-correcting system that could follow the energy transformations in the central nervous system. And then I thought, okay, how much computing capability do we need to do that? And I thought, yeah, it's about 3 decades away, factoring in Moore's law. It's about 3 decades. Okay, fine, put it on the shelf. But the next evolution of the story was I then went to Georgetown undergraduate, and I got to hear Carl Pribram, who was then working on a reinterpretation of the Project of Scientific Psychology with Merton Gill, who was a primary editor of the Freud work for the US and American and English-speaking communities, in exactly this kind of orientation, because he had also come out with the holonomic model of consciousness, memory, and perception, and realized that a certain branch of quantum mechanics, mathematics, was the language of the central nervous system. And as he tells the story and I tell the story, I asked him a couple of questions at the end of it about the mathematics. Anyway, we met up finally in 2000, I think it was, at a conference, neurofeedback conference. And he came up to me during the break and he said, what you're talking about here, what you're presenting, has summarized the last 25 years of my professional life. And I said, well, thank you. And I said, but you probably don't remember, but I heard you back at Georgetown. And he looked at me and he had this little head tilt he would do everything. And he said, were you that long-haired kid in the back who asked me about mathematics? And I went, yeah, that was me. And that started a multi-year relationship where we co-presented at a lot of the feedback conferences. So yeah, all those different fields kind of converge. And that's a fundamental aspect of what makes NeurOptimal so profoundly different, and it's a dynamical neurofeedback training system instead of a treatment-oriented approach based around protocols to deal with this symptom or that symptom or this symptom cluster or whatever.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know if you know, but I'm a Bowen family systems therapist. And so we are always looking for, what is the science of human behavior? Like, how do we understand this more scientifically? It's not just all about our feelings, right?
Right.
So,
I'll tell you some Bowen stories after.
Tell me. Oh, after, it'd be great.
Yeah, because I worked with Bowen back on Georgetown in the early days. So
you're sort of based in this thinking, and at Bowen conferences, right? We have scientists from many different disciplines, and so what went into you, and so this is part of the introduction, but you and your wife, Dr. Sue Brown, developing this unique form of neurofeedback is looking at it from many different fields of study. This wasn't just this one way of looking at it. And I think, I don't, there's just so much, I think, in our in our world, it's missing that broad view, that to take in the whole, what else is out there? How do we integrate?
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think, unfortunately, knowledge acquisition in the larger culture has become, hyper specialized.
Yes.
And that certainly has some advantages in many ways. But if you don't have that broad spectrum or that broad base, then it becomes almost impossible to hear something, from outside that frame of reference. And that means that there's certainly things you're going to miss. If you stick with the traditional Euclidean geometry, parallel lines never meet. Well, of course not. On an absolutely flat ideal surface, they don't. But in Riemannian geometry, which is the actual geometry of space-time, they always meet, because think like a ball, and depends where you start those parallel lines. They might even cross multiply, because you're talking about a certain region of parallel, right? So which one's true? Depends what you're trying to solve, right? And if you don't know about that difference, and all you know is, no, parallel lines never meet, well, then how come the train tracks look like they converge at the horizon? Well, it's an illusion. Well, of course it is, but how come? Why is that so evocative? Why doesn't our brain look at it and go, oh yeah, that's an illusion, let me correct it? Right?
Right, meaningful data, I think, right?
Yeah, information. Information means it's putting a form in. So it's having an effect in the perceptual moment. And partly that effect in the perceptual moment is based in your history. It can't not be. So if you've never seen a train, you might even wonder what this thing is, right? If you're used to it, or if you have studied the different forms of mathematics, you might be able to say, well, we're on a globe. That's all I have to know. That's why it converges at the horizon. So those kinds of more fundamental orientations, I think, are critically important. And part of the dilemma in the field of neurofeedback is, in my opinion, we have a lot of people who come with a partitive view, and they're correct in their partitive view, but then they try to take that small picture and make it as if it's the whole thing. So the split brain research, for instance, I think has been largely misunderstood. And we understand it as, well, there's a left and a right, and Each does different things, and kind of, the original study done by Gazzaniga isolated partial visual fields and then showed things like the word yellow written in green letters. And depending which perceptual hemisphere was made to focus on that percept, the subject would either say, oh, it's yellow, because they'd essentially read it, or they would say, oh, it's green, because they would respond to the color, but not the linguistic meaning. And so everybody took that to mean, oh yeah, one side's language and the other is, visual integration. Well, but that's the least important part of the study. Because what happens is the subject will, depending which side is initiating, they'll go, oh, that's yellow. No, wait a minute, it's green. Oh, it's the word yellow written in green. Because the brain integrates it.
Yes.
It can't not. It's a comprehensive, integrated, interconnected system like the World Wide Web.
So that's a great example, right, of why we, when we separate out knowledge and can't see the integrated whole, is that kind of what you're saying?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. We can look and say,
brain
no, it's yellow. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think that happens a lot in the neurofeedback world, which leads to a lot of confusions, because someone will say, oh, this form of neurofeedback is very effective with, and then, whatever the condition is, Adhd, depression, anxiety, whatever. And you have to do something different for each thing, because each of those is connected to a different functional difficulty in a region, in a location in the brain.
So let me just sort of clarify for the mom. So in the moms group that I lead, and we talk a lot about the differences between linear and nonlinear neurofeedback, and you're starting to talk about linear neurofeedback. And so one of the ways they do it is that they would say ADHD is located here or whatever, which by the way, the research shows there is no location. They cannot find the location.
That's right. That's exactly right.
It's problematic.
And that's part of the problem of the neuropsychological underpinnings of a lot of those approaches. The Russian neuropsychologist Luria had a way of the central nervous system.
Had a way of what? Say that again.
Of talking about the organization of the central nervous system, primary, secondary, and tertiary areas. And there are very few primary areas. And yes, if you damage those, it can be difficult to resurrect some aspects of whatever that is responsible for. But essentially, almost everything that occurs is at secondary or tertiary level, because it's integrated through perception and memory. So when we look at something in the world, we're literally not seeing just what it is. We're seeing what it may well have been for me in the past. We see our child having a difficulty, and we go, oh, this is the same that it's always been. It's still a problem. And if we don't get it fixed, it's going to be more of a problem in the future. That's a great way to make sure that things keep going the same.
How? If we're talking to moms who are, they've just got the diagnosis with COVID, a lot of parents are a little more focused on their kids and a little more anxious about their children.
Of course.
Right? So translate that for.
Sure. It's when you look at the problem, you're looking at what you don't want. And the more you keep looking at what you don't want, the more you're going to see it. You go to a restaurant, which of course nowadays it's a whole new experience, but you go into a restaurant, say pre-COVID, and the server comes over and says, what do you want? And if you go, well, what I don't want is, then you go, oh, okay, what do you want? Well, what I don't want is, and if at some point the server says, well, what do you want? And if you go, well, if I have to tell you that it's not
we did tell you, I grew up working in restaurants, like from the age of 12. My father and grandfather had IHOPs.
Oh yeah, okay.
I've had just a couple, but a few customers like that. It's like, seriously, very problematic. Go ahead.
So when I'm back in the day before I was using neurofeedback, when I was, just a psychologist, if you will, talk therapy kind of stuff, I used to do a lot of teaching around that as well. And, I would talk to the family and say, I understand we're going to go into detail about, all the things that you don't want. My question is, what do you want? Right? And what are you doing to make that happen? So it's like, well, he wants to stay out late, and, we think he ought to be in by 10 o'clock, and they say, and he says, well, they're always on my back. This is just to illustrate the purpose. It's like, well, do you ever tell him you appreciate it when he comes in before 10? Do you ever thank him for that? Mm-hmm. Well, no, he just ought to do it. Oh, yeah, that's going to work really well. How's that working for you? Mm-hmm. So when you go for the neurofeedback, if you're looking at what's wrong, here's this area, this region, this spot, this whatever, that's just wrong. Well, we have to fix that. No, that's not the best way to think about it, because the whole system is interconnected. And making what you think are small changes here actually impacts everywhere. It can't not. Mm-hmm. It's not that hyper-localized. So if you don't take that comprehensive view, but you try to pretend little parts at a time can be worked with, there's a lot of room for error in that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's, I remember in the early days, back when most neurofeedback systems had, one augment and maybe two inhibits. So augment means what you want to see more of, inhibits means what you want to see less of. Mm-hmm. And, I was demonstrating as technology became capable that we could have multiple augments, multiple inhibits, and two channels going. So two entirely different, quote, locations, and the brain could sort it out. And I remember people going, well, the brain can only do one thing at a time. Really? So while you're listening to me, you've stopped breathing? Mm. I understand your conscious mind and how you think about things may believe that one thing at a time is what counts. But your body, your brain is doing all kinds of things all the time. And you can upset that balance despite your best intentions. And then all kinds of other stuff happens. So the challenge, I think, with the linear neurofeedback is that it's looking just from A to B, and that's it. And frequently, the more you try to do A to B in a protocol-based way, the more the system goes off in another direction. Now you have to get a different protocol in to get it kind of back on track. Well, and then maybe it goes over here, and then, no, now we need another protocol. No, we got to go here. And you got to keep assessing. But the assessments are just snapshots. Mm-hmm. They're not how the brain and body are interacting, moving through the world. They're just, here's a snapshot. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of like taking a freeze frame of the entire World Wide Web and saying, now I know how it looks. Mm-hmm. No, I don't think you do. I think you just got a snapshot, and that's that moment, nothing more.
And I often think, I guess, about that when people come with a diagnosis of some kind, that's the snapshot, and it misses the emotional process that is that diagnosis, I guess. And even more broadly, like in the family, right? If my child has ADHD or something, how do I react to that? And how does my husband react to that? And how does her sister or brother react? I mean, there's just this.
Yeah, and you're talking there about the fact that it's all an embedded system, if you will. There's it doesn't help to say, oh, he has ADD. There's the problem. Just fix that. Mm-hmm. That's kind of treating your child or the identified patient as if they're a car, and you say, well, I have a flat in the left front tire. Please fix that. Well, you can do that with a car.
Right, exactly, where it makes sense, right? It's a tough perspective, I think, for people to move to, especially when they're struggling so much with this child who is suffering or who is making them suffer or whatever.
Sure, it is,
But I
because we
no
can
less valid, but certainly.
we can get caught up in our suffering. I mean, that is part of it. I think the one thing that I used to say a lot is that at a certain level, the diagnosis is, it's funny to think of it as a disorder or as indicating a disorder, because what it's actually doing is indicating a particular kind of orderliness. And we dislike it.
Say more. How is my daughter's ADHD a form of order?
Because predictably, you can anticipate some things that are going to happen. That's order. Right.
Yeah.
So,
and you know, of course, I take the multi-generational view, right? Where she makes sense in this family.
That's right.
She is a perfect fit for this family.
And, you know, taking that perspective is already to step away from saying, oh, she has ADD.
Right.
What you're saying is she's adapting in a complex way, comprehensively, to what's been happening in the past and what's potentially going to happen or possible in the future. Well, that's the same thing that I was talking about before, about if you just focus on the problem, you stay stuck there and you forget, wait a minute, this came from someplace. There are things helping it continue. And yeah, we want a more open future, right? We don't want to say, oh, this is exactly what it's going to be down the road, right? So how do you, usually it gets translated as how do you keep hope alive? Well, I would say, how do you keep in the present? How do you stay in the present and realize all things are possible? If you expect too much of a certain thing, you make it very difficult to find the miraculous as it emerges. You know, when does she go off that map? When does your daughter go off that map of say, oh gosh, here we go, it's going to be, and then it's different, you know, and what do you do then? Right. I remember this couple I worked with once, which, they were getting into their usual, dance of, all of that. And I said, whoa, hang on a second here. Can't you see that you're, and the wife turned and said, stop, we're getting into our disturby derby. And I laughed so hard. I basically fell out of the chair. I was like, disturby derby, are you kidding me? And thereafter, they couldn't go there. Because every time they started to enact that, they had this memory of me just laughing. Hilarious.
Nice little stimulus input there, yes.
Yeah. And so in a sense, what we're trying to, and that broke the orderliness. Right?
Okay.
Right? So it was a way of actually introducing disorder into this hyper orderliness.
Oh, interesting.
It's a different perspective, like the different kind of analogous to looking at, a system multi-generationally instead of just, oh, this person has a problem, I'll fix that person and then the problem goes away.
Right.
Well, no, it emerged out of a context. And if the context doesn't change, it's tough. It's tough to get significant change. Now, the opposite is true too. If the person does change at fundamental ways, one way or another, the context will change. It just will. The daughter would leave or, whatever, right?
Say more about that. I'm not quite understanding.
Well, one of the things that an early researcher discovered, Gene Peniston was his name, he developed what was then called alpha theta neurofeedback. And a lot has changed since those days, but the foundational work showed that despite these subjects coming in with various multiple diagnoses, primarily substance abuse issues, but also PTSD and all the kinds of things you would expect from hospitalized veterans, basically. What he found was that not only did they stop their addiction, right? Not only did that go away, but all kinds of other things in their life changed. So they started doing meditation, or they started doing yoga, or they, there were other health related changes that occurred, even though those weren't targeted or talked about. So it wasn't that you had to do something totally different to affect change across these various identified issues. It's that if you do the fundamental work, the whole system changes, and those issues don't come up. So the report from most of the subjects was, I don't even feel like drinking anymore. Now I'm paraphrasing, but it wasn't that they had to, exert willpower. They had to this and that. It was just, it's just not the same anymore. I don't do that.
Right. You change one part of the system and the whole system changes, if it's really a change.
If it's a fundamental change, yes. And so changing how the brain is understanding itself in terms of its own electrical processes, everything changes.
It makes me remember a family I worked with. They rented a neurofeedback unit. She had a couple of sons. The younger one in particular would be violent, and I think he was 9 years old. He was really troubled, and so was the parents and parents. The father had really significant health issues, and the mom couldn't get the sons to get interested or do the neurofeedback, so she did it herself. And guess what?
That's exactly right.
Calmed down.
Yeah, and that's a number of our trainers around the world have reported doing various different things in order to make it sort of the expectation, if you will, that the entire family will train.
That's why I'm whole family neurofeedback.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes.
I thought I'd just, set that one up for you. But, and, it's interesting. That's also where I think a lot of the trainers have realized the potential value of having a rental business, because they can show a family how to do sessions, right? And then take this home and you all use it. You have, a month or whatever the rental period's going to be. And that's a whole different thing than if you're going to the doctor's office to get treated because you have ADD.
Right.
It's a whole different thing. It's okay, this is something we're all doing together. And that may be one of the first things they've been doing together for a long time. Particularly now, this is more true before COVID, because now, you have bubble and you're interacting a lot more. But, back in the day, last year, whatever, you have the kid going for soccer, and for, up here it's hockey, and, there's baseball and basketball, and there's all the studies, and this one's in that class, and this one's doing that, and there's ballet, and, whatever. And so when is everybody together? Well, now it's like, okay, well, we're doing neurofeedback together. We're doing NeurOptimal together, and wow, I'm actually enjoying this, Yeah.
So Val, you're a dad.
Yes.
Tell us how how neurofeedback has impacted you as a father.
Well, besides it kind of taking over my whole life as my mission, and of course, everybody says, "Oh, NeurOptimal, it's Val's system." Well, no, it's Sue and I co-created this, and I was known in the field before we got together, but it really was the two of us together, me doing a lot of the behind the scenes, and Sue was kind of the test pilot, if you will. She was the one who would try things out, with clients with permission and all that. But she never actually got a system from me unless I had tried it on first and said, okay, I think this is okay, now you try it. you know, and so it's a real trial and error thing.
Hmm.
You know, it's been an interesting journey in so many ways because that vision I talked about for back in high school really did become the mission of my life. And for a long time, I just had to put it off because technology wasn't up to the task. And then I kept pushing and tugging the technology. How it's really affected me as a dad is it's very interesting because during that time, I went through a divorce from my daughter's mom. And that was very rough for everybody. And part of what that meant was,
Trying to interrupt. Are you saying as you were developing NeurOptimal, you were doing all this testing and then also going through this personally?
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's a big overlap during the time, like the 5-phase model, which was the original, more linear model, because that's all the technology would let us do. That got developed in 93, and there's an article from, I think it's 95 or 96, where that was published. That was right at the time that the divorce stuff was happening or starting to happen. And then, of course, that meant there was separation from my daughters, and, you know, we'd see them occasionally, vacation, summers, you know, all that. And there was just all that stuff. And Sue's children, Samantha and Alex, they're older. And really, Sue and I see all 4 children as ours. And that goes along with Zengar as a family. You know, we see the whole Zengar team as a family. So what effect has it had? Well, it really did kind of take over my life in many ways, which meant, you know, I couldn't be as available as I would have wanted to be. And part of that was just what happens in a divorce and, you know, with the different disagreements around that. But the thing that's interesting to me is when it was clear that my ex and I were going to get divorced, it's just very clear that was going to happen. I said, well, the best I can do is the best I can do for the next 10 to 15 years. And, you know, all I can hope is that at that point, when they're both out of college, when they're both, you know, that then there can be some, you know, rapprochement, right?
Yeah.
And I would say that's actually what's happened.
Okay.
You know, Dara, my youngest, works for the company, and she is phenomenal. She's a tech head, kind of like me, and we joke about it.
Your mathematical tech.
Yeah. Her older sister Sarah is an attorney who has put her law degree to the side to pursue her art career. And just amazing stuff that she does. But, you know, the legal thinking, thinking in those terms, that doesn't, yeah, okay, right, she's my daughter. Yeah, we can think that way, you know. It's kind of fun. And it has been the case that over the last, you know, several years, the rapprochement has really happened. Like, I took a wonderful trip with Dara to Europe, like a year ago or so, and we had some of the time it was just daddy-daughter time, and it was really precious to me, and other was work-related, and that was really important to me too, and just seeing what she does and how she does it, you know, and same thing with my eldest. I went to Georgetown undergraduate, and I think it was last year sometime, rented an Airbnb, and Sarah, the older one, came, and we just had a week in Georgetown. And I kind of took her to all the places that, you know, I knew from back in the day. And, you know, lots of tears, lots of, you know, lots of laughter, lots of connecting again. I felt I really had to take the long view. And that it helped me a lot that I had the NeurOptimal as it was being developed in order to make use of it. Because, well, you know how reactive all of it can be. And I think, fortunately, we're at a place down the road where that's no longer the case for me individually. So it's helped in knowing that it's there. And it's funny because, one of the questions that comes up frequently, we even did a little video on it, how do you know when you need a session, kind of thing. And, well, if you don't think you need one, that's really when you need one. But it's like, well, I know Sue will let me know. It's like, yeah, you could benefit from a session, It's like that line in the movie Dogma, where the one goes, all I'm saying is one of us could benefit from a nap. So just take a little break, things will be better. And I think that's an important thing too. It's part of moving from the treatment idea and the linear framing, like we're here to treat this problem and get rid of it. Moving to the training orientation, it's like, I don't have to have anything wrong to benefit and enjoy a session. That doesn't matter. It's not like, oh, I can only wait until I have a problem, then I can do it. No, we have trainers around the world who report that, every week they train, that twice a week, that every other week, or, whatever their schedule is, but that they just do, and it just becomes kind of a part of everyday living, if you will. Oh, today is a day for a session. So I don't know if that really answered your question. I tried to.
What I heard was it helped you with perspective, that long term, I'm going to do the best I can. Over time, it helped you with reactivity in very stressful situations. Stick-to-itiveness, so perspective. To me, the only way I can have stick-to-itiveness is when I have that long-term or that broad perspective. Also, what I heard in there too is it's just so similar to Bowen family systems theory and therapy in the sense of we're not looking for what's wrong. We're looking what is the picture? What is the picture without that value judgment? And that's what NeurOptimal does, right? There's no value judgment. It's just this look what you just did. Do you want to keep doing it? And it moves towards that greater organization that you talked about.
Yeah, the thing that is radically different from NeurOptimal, from all the other systems is all the other systems are doing some version of stimulus response. Now I'm simplifying quite a bit, but it's various versions of, oh, you're doing the thing we want you to do. Here's an electronic M&M. It's a ping, whatever it happens to be. And somebody else chooses that criteria, right? What NeurOptimal does is totally different. It's just presenting information. And the central nervous system itself, the fundamental thing it does is process information. So we're just saying, here's what you just did. And the underlying question is, do you want to keep doing that? Or do you want to do something different? So if you think about the metaphor that we use of the rumble strips along the side of the highway, right? Everybody talks about them as, well, if you're drifting out, then you know to come back because you feel the rumble. It's like, that's part of it. It's just giving you information, though. The rumble strip doesn't make you come back in. And if what you're trying to do is pull off the road for a bit, then the rumble strips are saying you're correctly pulling off the road, right? We're not guiding the system to do a certain thing that we happen to think is better. And we're not guiding the system to not do things that we think are less good or not good at all. It's just, here's where you are. And the central nervous system responds immediately to that. It's like when you go in the elevator and you look at the mirror in the back and you go, oh, I should You know, you don't have to think about it. It's not like the mirror is saying, hey, fix your hair. You know, the mirror is just showing you what's there.
And maybe you want crazy hair that day, you know?
And maybe you want, that's right. Maybe you want crazy hair. Yeah, that's right.
Well, thank you, Dr. Brown, for being with us today. I really appreciate your background, your history, your stories, and being willing to talk a little bit personally. I know the moms will appreciate that. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Good.
All right.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed it.
If anybody had questions through this recording, go ahead and place them in the comments. You can reach out to me at Whole Family Neurofeedback. It's just Miriam at Whole Family Neurofeedback or wholefamilyneurofeedback.com. And thanks again for being with us, Dr. Brown, and for the moms who are listening today. All right.
Thank you.